Hi, I'm Brandon from Tilda, and today I want to show you how to use one of our most significant features, ZeroBlock. ZeroBlock is a design editor for designers, professionals, that allows you to implement all your ideas as if you were working in Photoshop and create unique blocks in Tilda. So, let's get a head start on the project today. How to find a ZeroBlock? We either click on the ZeroBlock button on the right or access it from the blocks library. Here at the bottom, there is another link you can use to access the ZeroBlock. Let's add it. It comes with some default design. It's pretty similar to other blocks in Tilda and has all the available functions on other blocks. You can duplicate it, delete it, copy and paste it, and so on. The only difference is that the usual content button for other blocks is now called the Block Editor button. Without further ado, let's take a dive into this and see how it works. Once you enter the edit mode, this is what the edit mode looks like. Let me tell you what interface elements are there. There is an orange round button with a plus in the upper left corner. It serves to add new elements. By clicking on it, you open a list of elements such as text, image, shape, button, and others. At the top of the page, you can switch screen resolutions for adaptive design. Next, there is the Save button, the Close button, the Help button, and the button for the context menu. And the main button is Settings, here in the lower right corner. This button can either be used to customize the artboard or the elements. There are two areas here. One is the main working area. We call it Grid Container. This explains the area of the block. In the lower left corner, there are two helpers that point to the area limits. And the second area is Window Container, which is what we call the limits of the browser window. The 12-column grid used in Tilda is also visible here, which is always useful. Now, let me create a custom design. I will comment on every step I take. Let me first delete this. To add an element, I click on the button with a plus in the upper left corner, and I add a text element. That's what it looks like. The question is, what can you do with this text? You can move it around, edit text by double-clicking on it, or resize it. If you observe, there are only two buttons for that, because the height of the text box adapts automatically. It is way easier to work with ZeroBlock using your keyboard. I strongly recommend that, since it helps you get the job done faster. Here are some basic shortcuts. To move the element, you can use the keyboard arrows. Press up or down to move the selected element by 1 pixel at a time. If you hold down Shift, the position will automatically change by 10 pixels. Command-Z is a common shortcut you can use to undo the previous operation. I said Command because I work on Mac. If you're working on Windows, press Control instead of Command. If I want to duplicate an element, I press Command-C to copy it and Command-V to paste. The backspace button deletes the element. I will talk about more shortcuts for the functions we are going to learn in this video. Now, let's have a closer look at the Element Setting panel. To open it, click the Settings button in the lower right corner. It's collapsed by default so that you can see the entire area of the screen, even if the screen of your monitor is not large, or you have a monitor size that's similar to mine. It's very easy to use the Tab button when you want to open and close the Settings panel. I use it all the time. In fact, I always have my left hand on Tab. Let's have a quick look at the options. The first row allows you to align the element within the container. You can align it to the center, to the left, or the right of the container. Now let's leave it in the center and see how it goes. The next section shows the position of the element. The horizontal and vertical axes are all measured in pixels. As you can see, once I drag the element, the values change. This cross shows where the anchor of the element is located. If you click on this plus container, an additional menu appears, but I will refer to that later in this video, as the functions here are mainly for advanced users. This slider changes the width of the element. You can also change the alignment within the element, text color, and font size. Additionally, if you place the mouse over here and click on the up and down key, the value will also change. And if you want to set up the font, its weight, the line spacing, and letter spacing, you can do that over here. Again, it's much easier when using the keyboard. Select an element and press plus. The text size will increase. If you hold down Command and click up and down, the line spacing will change. If you click left or right, the letter spacing will change. To duplicate an element, hold down the Alt button and drag it to any direction. The element will be duplicated automatically. Let's proceed with element settings. The opacity can be changed either with the slider or with the keyboard. Select the element and press any number. 1 represents 10%, 5 represents 50%, and 0 represents 100% opacity. You can either rotate the element and arrange it, which means you can position it in front or behind other elements. For example, if an object overlaps another object, select Send to Front, and the object will appear in front of all the elements. Then there are Copy, Delete, and Lock buttons, which are pretty self-explanatory. Locking the object is a useful function if you want to freeze it, so that it doesn't get selected with lasso or moved with the mouse. To lock or unlock the object, use the button L on your keyboard. Among other options, you can add a link to the element and specify if you want it to open in the same window or a new window. Then there are some useful options for SEO. REL attribute allows you to mark some links as nofollow to avoid unwanted count by search engines. The tag option helps you assign either div or h1, h2, or h3 tags to the text element to optimize the content. You can also modify the pointer events value. However, this option is mainly designed for advanced users. The last 2 tabs allow you to animate elements. In Tilda, you can assign 2 types of animation to each element. The first type, Basic Animation, allows you to pick a preset effect, so you don't need to think about its duration, triggers, or anything else. You simply assign a ready-made effect to your element. This is very convenient and easy to use. In case you want to create custom animation, then there is a second type, Step-by-Step Animation. It allows you to build very powerful effects and customize every step. The animation is a large topic. We are going to walk you through all the features in another tutorial fully dedicated to animation. For now, let's get back to ZeroBlock. Let's see some other elements we can add to our ZeroBlock. You can upload an image using drag and drop. The default size of an image equals its frame size. If you want to set the original size of the picture, click Original Size, and the picture will be resized. If you want to round the corners of the image and make a user pic out of it, then use the radius field and put 50 pixels, for example. To make the perfect circle out of a squared image, the radius value should be half the image's width. If the width is 200 pixels, like in my case, then I add 100 in the radius field. Alright, now we have a quotation. Let's add a person's name. As you can see, I duplicate the text element and type Steve Jobs, for example. Let's make the font size a bit smaller. To make the text grayish, I prefer to decrease its opacity rather than paint it gray like that. And let's add some space in between the letters. Now let's add a shape element. It's a rectangle by default. You won't find complex shapes in Tilda. If you need one, draw it in any graphics editor. Unlike the text, we can change both width and height for the shape. It is easier to set small values in the settings panel. For example, I want to make a dash. Here it is. I'm moving it using the arrows on the keyboard while holding Shift. By the way, when you change the size of the picture, the aspect ratio always remains fixed. You shouldn't worry about distortions. Unlike other graphics editors, in Tilda, we see no point once the image is distorted. Additionally, we can also work with multiple objects simultaneously. You can select all the elements by clicking on Command A. You can either drag the elements or move them around. You can also select certain elements and align them to the right, left, or center in the settings panel. There are two types of alignment. This can either be in relation to each other or in relation to the container. You can also set a border for the shape, the size of this border, the radius that allows you to round the corners just like we did with the image. Below, you can choose among border styles and either make it dotted or dashed. You can add shadows and animation too. Let's add another element, a button. You can change both the button's height and width. You can also modify the typography inside the button. Let's make the letters a bit smaller. You can change the button's color using the BG color option, and above, you can set the button text and assign a link for it. One of the edge-cutting advantages is that the settings allows you to modify how your button reacts once the mouse is over it. For example, I want the button to change its color to a bright blue on hover. That's how it works. You can change duration. This is the speed of the animation. You can also animate the border and the caption. Now, let's create a shadow for our button. Offset X sets the horizontal offset of the shadow, Y the vertical offset. Let's blur the shadow a bit and set the opacity to 50%. That's what our button looks like. In Zero Block, you can also work with layers. This is useful if you want to create compositions and several fully or partially overlapping elements. To show the Layers panel, press Command L. You can position each of them according to different parameters. This will help to create additional effects. For example, if you want to create the illusion of depth, simply add shadow to the front elements. What we have done so far looks like a nice review or a quotation. To have a perfect perspective of the design without grid lines and controls, click on the F button. This will help present a clearer view of your design. Click F again to restore the interface. You can always see the shortcuts if you hit the Advanced button in the upper right corner. The most common shortcuts are listed right away, and the full list is accessible via the Keyboard Shortcuts button. Let's now figure out how to adapt Zero Block designs to various screens and gadgets. At the top of the screen, there are 5 icons with the most common resolutions. The first one on the right is a desktop mode with the screen width starting from 1200 pixels up to the maximum. Then you see a horizontal tablet mode, a version that is meant for tablets and large smartphones in an upright position. Next, there are adaptations on both horizontal and vertical screens that are meant for small smartphones, such as the iPhone 5S. When you hover over these icons, the tooltips appear and indicate the exact screen width for every one of them. If we try to switch the screens, the artboard area changes, but the design element remains the same. So, what we need to do is to adapt the design for each screen. Here, I can show how the adaptation process works. You can use alignment. And of course, it's important to change the font size. This is how we manage to adapt our content. Now, let's pay attention to the settings panel. When we switch to a different resolution, some settings are grayed out, while others remain black. This works pretty straightforward. If you have changed any value for a particular screen size, the value turns black automatically, like the X and Y values that we can see here. They are black because we changed the element's position within the tablet mode. All the gray figures show that those options weren't modified yet. By default, those values are inherited from the ones set up in the desktop mode, but you can choose to change them anytime. Remember, we changed the text size to mobile mode. That's why it appears black here. This difference makes it easier for you to see at a glance the values that are set up for a particular resolution and the values that are not. You can also edit the block area size for each resolution. Just hover to the bottom of this artboard. You can drag it like that and choose the right height of the block for each screen. Let's say for a mobile device, this serves best. Another edge-cutting feature is the guides. They help to align elements and keep the design clean and unified. You can add as many as you like. To do this, go to the Context menu. At the bottom, you can add either horizontal or vertical lines, as well as hide or display them. There is also a shortcut to add a new guide. Press Command and H to add a horizontal guide, and Command-Shift-H to add a vertical one. To delete a guide, click the little cross here on the guide. If we click on an empty area of the screen, the artboard settings will appear. What are the basic options here? The crucial option is the grid container height, which is measured in pixels. The grid container is the main working area. It is fixed and is always displayed in the center of the screen. Let me save it and show you how our blog looks in Tilda. Perfect, just like that. Okay, let me go back to the editor. I reopen the Artboard settings panel by clicking on an empty space. The grid container height is already set to 550 pixels. If we switch to the mobile screen mode, the height is different, 460 pixels, because we changed it. Let's skip this section. I'll come back to it later. Here you can adjust the block background, either by picking a color for it or by uploading an image. Let's drop an image. Okay, it's loaded, and now we have a customized background. Let's see what it looks like in Tilda. This is our 0 block. You can always add any other block below or above the 0 block. Now let's dive deeper into 0 block features. This part is for advanced users who are experienced with web design. The first thing I want to explain is how the container works. Imagine that I want this block in Tilda to appear full screen on any device, no matter the screen size. For now, its height is fixed. As the height of the screen varies from device to device, in web design, there is a concept called fluid or responsive design. I will have to set up my values in percentage this time, not in pixels. This will help make my content adapt to any screen regardless of the size. This is how window container height works. If I set 100% here, you can see how the background image stretched to fit my screen. Now this block will adapt to any screen size and will always be full screen for any device. Down here, you can still see the helpers marking the beginning of the window container and the grid container. And you see now that the background image expands to the size of the window. You can also change the position of the grid container relative to the window, align it to the top or bottom. By default, it is centered. This is how our block looks in Tilda now. Nice! We now have a full screen block. The next step is a bit tricky but useful. Let's see how we can align and fix the elements of the window container and not the grid container. Let me upload a logo to make an example. Let's say I want the logo to be frozen in the upper right corner. To do this, I will have to select it and open the container settings. Instead of going for the grid container, I will simply opt for the window container. You see, the logo was moved to the edge of the browser window. If I move it from the corner, you can see the cross that shows that its anchor is located here in the upper left corner. Let me save it and show you how it appears in Tilda. This is a perfect example of how it looks. If I want the logo to be anchored to the upper right corner, then I again open the container section and modify the horizontal axis X setting. This time, not to the left, but to the right. Look, the logo moved to the right. I can also move it, and here you can notice how the positioning values are gradually changing. The X value is -30 pixels, This means that the element was moved to the left by 30 pixels. The vertical Y value is 30. This also indicates that the logo was also moved 30 pixels downward. Let me save it. And now the logo is always anchored to the right edge. At this phase, I want to show you how to make any of the elements adaptive to any screen size. What we need to do is to switch the width and the height values to the percentage. Let's say I want half of my screen to always be yellow. I add a yellow shape, open the container settings, select the window container, and then I switch the width and height values from pixels to percent and set 100% for both. The height and width of the shape are now 100%, and it fills the entire window container. Now, I will change the arrangement and send it to the back. I want the yellow shape to be less than 100% wide. Let's leave it at 50 to occupy half of the screen. And this is what it looks like. If I want to align the shape to the right, I will set the horizontal position X to 50%, and it shifts to the right. I'll make it a bit nicer and add a name to it. This is how it looks. Let's say I want to move this text to the yellow part of the screen. I will lock the shape so it doesn't get selected. Then I proceed to select the elements, dragging them to the right while holding Shift key to keep moving them along one axis, the horizontal one in my case. Let's add a title. I change a container for it as well. This is our design. I don't know what it is, but it looks nice. Let's save and check it out. All right. It's also handy to snap and change the axes values if you're making a cover. Let me delete this. I want all the elements to be centered so that this block looks like a page cover. Let me show you how to do it. First, you will need to change the alignment of the text. Then proceed by setting both the X and Y axis to the center. And that's it. The object will now be centered. The text element needs to be centered too, so we'll do the same thing for it as well. I think we don't need so much text here. I will also center the button. And we've got a pretty common cover. Let me move it up a bit. Let's see how it looks. Nice. Now let's imagine I want the button to be always horizontally centered and vertically frozen to the bottom. I change the container to Window and select Bottom for Y axes. The button moves downward. I will move it a bit higher, and this is where the button will always be located, irrespective of the screen size. Let's do an experiment. If I change the height of the screen, the button remains at the bottom of the window. This is a huge time saver. Remember, at the beginning of this video, I showed you how you could adapt designs manually to any screen size. It took a lot more time. Now, we can just switch between the screens. Oh right, we have changed some settings for certain screens previously. That's why the block is not responsive. It's easy to deal with that. We just need to delete those values, and we've got the correct positioning similar to the desktop mode. I will repeat the same process with the button. This is the beauty of adapting your design using the containers. There's less work for you. You see, the elements are centered. It's very easy. In order not to forget where you have the anchor, there is always a helper, a small plus sign that shows where the anchor is located. The entire process is as simple as a piece of cake. Let me remind you of some of the most common shortcuts that will help you save time. Press Tab to enable or disable the settings panel. To switch between screen resolutions, hold Command and press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then, you can change the opacity of the element by pressing the keys from 1 to 0. You can move the element using keyboard arrows. Use Command C and Command V to copy and paste. Command Z is to undo previous operation. If I press F, I see the block without the interface and the grid. If I press G, from the word grid, then the grid will be hidden, and the interface elements will remain. Once this tutorial is over, we will love to hear from you. Please send your feedback. We're always happy to help and answer any questions. I wish you luck in creating your great design. Thank you so much for being with us. Bye!